That night, an eerie calm settled over the neighborhood on Lancaster Boulevard. Streetlights cast a flickering, uncertain glow on the rows of parked cars, with only the distant drone of a highway disturbing the peace. But that quiet was a fragile illusion. Behind the closed doors of one small apartment, a horrific scene was about to unfold. A single light remained on, burning deep into the night. Later, neighbors would tell authorities they heard faint, troubling noises, a sudden thud, what might have been a muffled cry, and then an absolute, chilling silence. In the darkest hours before dawn, a silhouette slipped out of the building, dragging a heavy burden into the shadows. The movements were swift and methodical, executed like a well-rehearsed plan. By sunrise, the home that once echoed with the laughter of 3 young boys had fallen, unnervingly still. Its curtains were drawn tight, the front door was securely locked, and the woman who had fought for so long to protect herself and her sons was gone. The events inside that home during the early hours of August 10th would soon unravel, becoming one of Lancaster's most haunting and tragic cases. It's a chilling tale of control, terror, and the desperate final act of a man who refused to let go. When Shayla Elizabeth Cabrera left Peru, she carried a hope shared by millions seeking a new life, the dream of safety, stability, and opportunity. She was determined to give her children everything she never had. Moving to the United States wasn't just about changing locations. It was a profound leap of faith. She arrived carrying dreams, incredible courage, and a mother's fierce will to build a better future from scratch. At just 33 years old, Shayla had already accomplished so much of what she had set out to do. In her community in Lancaster, California, she was known as a doting mother to 3 young boys, ages 9, 6, and 4, and a woman who worked tirelessly to give them a good life. Friends and neighbors consistently described her incredible warmth and generosity. She was the kind of person who always remembered birthdays, would bring a meal to someone in need, and somehow found a way to smile through her own hardships. To those who knew her best, Shayla was a fiercely devoted mother and an incredibly loyal friend. She took immense pride in the small things, cooking homemade Peruvian meals for her boys, helping them with their homework, and filling their modest apartment on Lancaster Boulevard with photos, drawings, and colorful touches that transformed it into a real home, even on a tight budget. She had built a sanctuary filled with laughter and love, but beneath that surface of calm and normalcy, a dark secret was festering. To the outside world, her husband, Shayla Cabrera, appeared to be a caring and supportive partner. He smiled for the cameras, played the part of a loving father, and projected the image of a stable family man. But behind closed doors, the reality was terrifyingly different. According to her mother, who still resides in Lima, Shayla had filed a report against him back in Peru, detailing his history of physical aggression. The report claimed Shayla's temper was violent, that his hands had caused her pain, and that he'd even turned his anger on their youngest child. Those who knew the truth lived in constant fear for her safety, but Shayla concealed most of her suffering. Like countless women in similar situations, she held on to the hope that a fresh start in a new country might change him. Unfortunately, the aggression didn't end. It simply crossed the border with them. Soon, friends in California started to notice a change in Shayla. Her vibrant, cheerful spirit began to dim, replaced by a quiet, bone-deep exhaustion. She continued to smile and help her neighbors, but there was a new distance in her eyes. One of her closest friends, Elizabeth Russo, would later reveal to investigators that Shayla felt utterly trapped. Shayla had used the ultimate threat. If she ever left, he would take the children. It was a fear that paralyzed her, keeping her in the marriage for years. Yet, even living with that terror, Shayla's kindness never wavered. She continued to help her neighbors with small favors and shared fond stories about growing up in Peru, and she constantly spoke of the bright future she dreamed of for her sons. She wanted them to have a peaceful life, to be surrounded by love, to get a good education, to see the world, and to live without fear. That dream was the fuel that kept her going, even as the walls of her marriage were closing in. By the summer of 2025, Shayla had reached a decision. The years of mistreatment had finally worn her down, and she decided she could no longer live in fear. She started meticulously planning her escape, stashing away money, confiding in trusted friends, and getting her divorce papers in order. She was also ready to bring Josimar to the attention of the Lancaster authorities, resolved to finally secure her boy's safety. On August 9th, she made a call to her parents back in Peru and laid everything bare. She told them she was prepared to walk away and was heading to the police. Her voice was a mixture of terror and optimism, terrified of what he might do if he discovered her plan, but hopeful for a chance to finally begin a new life. Her mother would later recall that conversation with perfect clarity. It was the last time she would ever hear her daughter speak. Back in their apartment, the air was thick with tension. Josimar sensed what was on the horizon, and the thought of losing his grip on her was more than he could stand. Friends would later testify that he'd been withdrawn and simmering with anger in the days leading up to Shayla's disappearance. But what Shayla couldn't have known was that he had already decided her fate. His twisted logic was simple. If he couldn't keep her, no one could. And that very night, the course of their lives changed forever. August 9th, 2025, marked the last time Shayla Cabrera was ever seen alive. In the pre-dawn hours of August 10th, as her children slept just feet away, an unspeakable act of violence took place inside their Lancaster apartment. The specifics are locked away in sealed court records, but the narrative pieced together by investigators paints a truly chilling picture of calculated brutality. Prosecutors allege that Josimar Cabrera ended his wife's life, right inside the home they shared with their 3 young sons. The charges brought by the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office came with a special circumstances allegation. A blade was the weapon of choice. This wasn't a spontaneous argument that spiraled out of control. It was cold, it was methodical, and it was absolute. By the time the sun came up, the small apartment that once echoed with laughter had been plunged into an eerie silence. The children woke up to a world that had been irrevocably shattered, and a community that had looked up to Shayla for her resilience and warmth would soon be in mourning for the very woman who had spent her last days fighting for a new beginning. Inside that small apartment on Lancaster Boulevard, 3 little boys were sleeping soundly in their beds, completely oblivious to the fact that their entire world was crumbling around them. They never heard the struggle. They never witnessed the violence. Just one room over, their own father, the man who had sworn to protect them, was extinguishing their mother's life. The very walls of that apartment, once alive with laughter and bedtime stories, now held nothing but a deafening silence and the lingering shadow of unimaginable cruelty. Once the deed was done, Josimar Cabrera turned his attention to the aftermath. The man who had spent years dominating his wife with fear now focused on controlling her final resting place. Investigators would later describe what happened next not as a chaotic panic, but as a deeply unsettling display of composure. He carefully wrapped Shayla's body in a large swath of fabric, folding it securely and binding it tight to hide any evidence of his crime. A perfect match to what was captured on the surveillance footage that would ultimately crack the case wide open. His movements were deliberate, not those of a man panicking after an impulsive act of violence, but of someone methodically executing a preconceived plan. Neighbors would later remember hearing subtle sounds in the dead of night, doors shutting, the sound of something heavy being dragged, and then the distinct rumble of a car engine starting up. In the stillness of that neighborhood, even the slightest noise traveled effortlessly through the quiet air. At around 2 a.m, a neighbor coming home from a late shift spotted something strange. The entire complex was dead quiet, the parking lot shrouded in low light, but a single man was up and about. It was Josimar, meticulously cleaning out the trunk of his silver sedan. She stopped for a moment, puzzled. At that time of night, there was absolutely no reason for anyone to be doing that. What she couldn't have known was that she was an eyewitness to the very beginning of a cover-up. Investigators would later confirm that she had inadvertently watched a man preparing to dispose of his wife's body. The case's turning point arrived hours later, when detectives got their hands on footage from a nearby Ring doorbell camera. In the grainy, black-and-white video, time-stamped at 4 a.m., a lone figure is seen hauling a large, cumbersome object wrapped in fabric across the pavement. The sheer strain in his movements, the obvious difficulty he had hoisting it, left no room for doubt. That heavy bundle was Shayla Cabrera. This footage would soon become the cornerstone of the murder investigation, chilling, undeniable proof of the ultimate act of betrayal. Just moments later, the man muscled the bundle into the trunk of the car. He slammed the lid shut, circled around to the driver's seat, and disappeared into the darkness. His path led him away from Lancaster and onto the shadowed, twisting roads, heading toward the Angeles National Forest, a sprawling expanse of wilderness spanning over 700,000 acres of craggy canyons and steep cliffs. By day, it's a place of serene beauty, but once night falls, it has a dark history as a disposal site for the city's most violent secrets. Its remote location, sheer drop-offs, and vast, unforgiving terrain made it the ideal location to erase someone from existence. Josimar navigated deep into the heart of the forest, maneuvering through hairpin turns and tight passages until he located a secluded spot, completely shielded from prying eyes. There, in the biting chill of the pre-dawn air, he popped the trunk and dragged out the heavy bundle. The woods were dead silent. Not a single car passed. There were no witnesses to what he was about to do. He hauled Shayla's body to the precipice of a steep embankment and shoved it over the edge. Her body crashed down through the rocks and underbrush, finally settling in the pitch-black abyss below. The woman who had once shared his home, his table, and his life. The mother of his own 3 children. The woman who was once C, was now left for dead, treated like a piece of trash. His grim task completed, Josimar simply got back in his car and drove home. Back at the apartment, their sons were still sound asleep, completely oblivious that their mother was never coming back. As the sun rose, he started to construct his cover story, a web of lies. Then, 2 days later, on August 12th, 2025, Shayla's friends were becoming frantic. They hadn't heard a word from her since August 9th. No phone calls, no text messages, not even a post on social media. Nothing. This radio silence was completely out of character for her. She was constantly connected, particularly when it involved her kids. There was no way she would just vanish without telling somebody. Deeply concerned, her friends went straight to the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department and officially reported her missing. Deputies were dispatched to the Cabrera's apartment. Josimar was the one who answered the door. He seemed composed, even courteous, and appeared willing to help. But the moment detectives started pressing for answers, his story started to unravel. His initial claim was that Shayla had been picked up by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. This was a carefully crafted lie, designed to exploit the fear and bureaucratic chaos that surrounds immigration cases. He probably figured it would buy him some time and throw investigators off the scent, since those cases are notorious for getting bogged down in red tape and communication blackouts. But when detectives pressed him for more information, his story changed. Suddenly, he was claiming Shayla had run off with another man. Then came a third version of events, where he alleged she'd been in some kind of accident, but he couldn't provide any specifics. No witnesses, no police report, not even a location. Every story he told directly contradicted the one before it. Each new excuse crumbled under the slightest bit of scrutiny. The detectives quickly understood they weren't talking to a concerned husband, but to a man desperately trying to cover his tracks. As the investigation started to take shape, Shayla Cabrera's friends came forward with bombshell information. They described years of domestic abuse, recounting the numerous times she had reached out for help, and the constant terror that defined her daily life. They revealed to detectives her plan to finally leave her husband and his chilling threats to take the kids away if she ever dared to. The facade of the dedicated family man that Josimar had so carefully constructed was rapidly falling apart. His lies were shifting like sand, and her friends' testimonies painted a horrifying picture of long-term abuse. Investigators now knew this was far more than a simple missing person case. This was a homicide investigation, plain and simple. Detectives started meticulously combing through every potential lead. They pulled phone records, scoured traffic camera footage, and checked every security system in the vicinity of the Lancaster apartment complex. Then, on August 13th, only 3 days after Shayla disappeared, investigators got the break they needed. A neighbor's Ring doorbell camera had recorded footage from the pre-dawn hours of August 10th. The footage captured Josimar heaving a large, fabric-wrapped object across the ground and out of the apartment complex. He was clearly struggling with its immense weight before managing to load it into the trunk of his car. That single, chilling clip changed the entire investigation. What had started as a standard missing person report had just escalated into a full-blown homicide investigation. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department Homicide Bureau immediately took control of the case. Detectives began coordinating with specialized search and rescue teams from Crescenta Valley, Altadena, and Montrose. The task ahead of them was monumental: to scour over 700,000 acres of the Angeles National Forest, a sprawling wilderness of steep canyons, jagged cliffs, and thick brush. Trying to find a body in that terrain was like searching for a needle in a haystack, but they knew it was a search they had to undertake. At the same time, new intelligence came in that made the situation even more critical. Josimar and the couple's 3 young children had now vanished too. In coordination with both the Mexican and Peruvian consulates, U.S. authorities issued international alerts, fearing he had already slipped across the border. Intelligence suggested he was heading south, making his way toward South America. Then, on the morning of August 16th, just after 10 a.m., the radio crackled to life, with the call every investigator both hopes for and dreads. Members of the Montrose Mountain Search and Rescue Team had spotted something down a steep embankment in a remote section of the Angeles National Forest. A bundle of fabric that looked chillingly familiar. When homicide detectives got to the scene, they carefully made their way down the rugged slope, navigating through the rocks and brush. Wrapped in the exact same type of material from the surveillance video, they discovered the body of 33-year-old Shayla Cabrera. She was pronounced dead right there at the scene. The grim discovery confirmed everyone's worst fears. The object from the surveillance footage was, in fact, her body. News of the finding spread like wildfire through Lancaster's Peruvian community. Candlelight vigils started to form almost instantly. People brought flowers, photos, and handwritten notes to remember the woman who had come to the United States, chasing a dream of safety and a better life for her kids. Instead, her life was violently cut short by the very man she should have been able to trust the most. On that very same day, investigators got word from Peru. The 3 Cabrera children had been found safe and were now in protective custody. They were alive, but their mother was gone, and their father was officially an international fugitive. That evening, dozens of people gathered in front of Lancaster City Hall. Some held candles, while others held signs that read, "Justice for Shayla and not one more." Their faces illuminated by candlelight as they mourned the loss of a mother, a friend, and a neighbor who had always given so much of herself. Meanwhile, an entire continent away, Josimar Cabrera was already thousands of miles away, hiding out in Peru, moving from city to city, trying desperately to stay one step ahead of the law, but investigators were closing in on him. The same combination of technology, persistence, and international cooperation that had exposed his crime in the first place would soon bring him face to face with justice. After fleeing the United States, Josimar crossed multiple international borders. In a desperate bid to evade capture, he was actually detained not once, but twice, first in Mexico and later in Peru, both times while traveling overland, trying to outrun the authorities. But, despite being questioned, he was released on both occasions. At that point, U.S. prosecutors hadn't filed formal charges yet, which meant foreign governments had no legal grounds to hold him. It was an incredibly frustrating delay for investigators, who were already certain he was responsible for Shayla's death. When Josimar finally arrived at the Jorge Chavez International Airport in Lima, Peru, local authorities were waiting for him. He was stopped and questioned, and the 3 young children, who had been traveling with him, were immediately taken into protective custody. Still, without a formal extradition order or official charges from the U.S., Peruvian police had no authority to detain him. The man suspected of murdering his wife was allowed to just walk away, while his own children were handed over to child welfare officials. In the days that followed, the case exploded in the media in both the United States and Peru. Shayla's story went viral on social media and news outlets, with a growing public outcry questioning how her killer was still walking free. As her family was overcome with grief, the Peruvian Foreign Ministry teamed up with U.S. consular officials and moved swiftly to guarantee the children's safety. In just a matter of days, the 3 boys were on a flight out of Lima, with a layover in Mexico City, before returning home to Los Angeles, where they were finally back in the arms of their maternal grandmother, Helga Rosillo. For Helga, it was a bittersweet and heartbreaking reunion. Her grandsons were home and safe, but her daughter was never coming back. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, prosecutors in Los Angeles County were wasting no time. Detectives with the L.A. County Sheriff's Homicide Bureau were busy putting together a mountain of evidence, including hundreds of pages of surveillance footage and witness accounts, along with the forensic findings from the apartment and Shayla's documented history of domestic violence reports. On August 21st, Amspancisist and ATCT, the entire case file landed on the desk of the district attorney's office for a formal review. And it didn't take long. Later that same day, the D.A.'s team announced they were officially charging Josimar with 1 count of murder, tacking on a special allegation that he had used a knife as a deadly weapon. The very next morning, an extradition arrest warrant was issued, and Interpol was brought into the loop. A red notice, which is basically an international wanted alert, was blasted across the globe, flagging Josimar as a fugitive wanted for homicide. This case shot to the top of the priority list for both the U.S. Department of Justice and the Peruvian National Police. Word coming out of Peru painted a picture of an intense manhunt, with agents tracking his every move along the Pan-American Highway, scouring hotels and transit hubs, and working in lockstep with Interpol offices in both Mexico and the United States. For almost 2 weeks, Josimar managed to stay 1 step ahead, but with that red notice hanging over him, every move he made was a bigger gamble. His face was popping up on international databases, border alerts, and all over the news in both countries. Investigators figured the mounting pressure was boxing him in, leaving him with nowhere to turn. And finally, on August 27, 2025, the chase was over. Josimar surrendered. He walked right into Interpol headquarters in Lima and gave himself up. The Peruvian National Police released footage of the moment he was taken into custody, showing Josimar standing there in handcuffs, wearing a black shirt emblazoned with the Interpol logo, with an officer on either side of him. His face was a blank slate. His head hung low as camera flashes went off and officers escorted him away. According to officials in Peru, he's set to remain in custody in Lima while the extradition process plays out. These things can often drag on for several months, requiring a ton of diplomatic back and forth, and court hearings to make sure every I is dotted and Nt is crossed according to international law. Once it's all approved, he'll be flown back to California to stand trial for the murder of Shayla Cabrera. If he's found guilty, Shayla Cabrera is looking at a maximum sentence of 26 years to life behind bars. For Shayla's family, the long road to justice is still far from over. But after months filled with fear, desperate searching, and unimaginable heartbreak, there's finally a glimmer of hope that the man who took everything from her will be held accountable. The wheels of justice for Shayla Cabrera have finally started turning, beginning a long journey home, a journey powered by the love of a mother who came to America looking for a peaceful life, and by a community that refuses to let her memory fade. Thanks for watching Crimes in the FOG. If you're captivated by mysteries from all corners of the globe, you won't want to miss what's next. Hit that subscribe button now for more gripping investigations.